All right, everyone, I'm going to try to go through a relatively short tutorial on how to enter scatter plots in your graphing calculator and also be able to show you some of the common problems that we have when it comes to errors and so on. So the very first thing I want you to notice is this table of values here on the right, where I'm talking about my independent variable being the hours that I study, or my X values, and the dependent variable being my exam score, or my Y values. In other words, my exam score depends on how many hours I study. So the very first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I'm actually in function mode. So I'm going to hit mode, and notice every key I enter is going to be in red so you can follow along. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to make sure I'm on function. I am already on function, but if you're on sequence, you're going to want to make sure to go back and highlight function, hit enter. So what we want to do is enter data. So I'm going to go ahead and hit stat right here. So this is where I'm going to enter my statistics or my data. So I'm going to hit stat, I'm going to go ahead and go to edit, and I'm going to enter my data. I'm going to enter all my X values in list 1, or my hours studying, and I'm going to enter my exam scores in list 2. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and you can go ahead and do that as well. So I'm going to pause, go ahead and enter those values in. The one thing I want you to notice here is that these values are always going to come in pairs. So if you happen to have some sort of extraneous value over in list 2 that doesn't have a matching X value, you know that you made a mistake somewhere along the way. So make sure these are all ordered pairs. They all have a partner. All right, so now I've got my list of values, or my data set, entered into my calculator. So from here, I want to find my scatter plot, but I want to make sure I have my plots set up correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit second, and that y equals, and that's going to give me my stat plot. All right, notice when I hit second y equals, and I get into my stat plots, that all of them are turned off. They all say off. And that number 5 says on, but we're not going to worry about that. We're just looking at the numbers 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to go ahead and turn one of these on. If I want to make a scatter plot, I need to have one of these turned on. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to hit that first plot, and notice it says off, so I'm going to highlight on and hit enter. And I'm also going to go down to type. Now I'm creating a scatter plot. Okay, so none of these over here are scatter plots. Right, we have box and whisker, we have a bar graph or a histogram. I want a scatter plot, so I want to make sure that first one is highlighted, and I'm going to hit enter. So that's all I'm going to do with this at the moment. All right, now what I'm going to do is see if my data graphs. So I have it entered, I have a scatter plot on, and I'm going to hit graph. Well, notice when I hit graph, it says error. So I'm going to go through a few of the common errors that you might find on your calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and quit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my stat plot, and I'm going to make sure that I have the correct lists entered. So stat plot, I'm going to hit enter. Now notice down here with X list, it says list 1. Well, that is where my X values are. But my Y list says list 4. I don't have any data in list 4. My Y is in list 2. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that and show you where to switch your lists. So I'm going to go to second, and if you see down here above 2, it says L2. So I want to make sure that I have the correct lists for my X's and Y's. I put my data in list 1 and list 2, and here it says now list 1 and list 2. There's nothing else on here you really have to worry about. You can change the marks you want if you want, or you can change your color if you want, but we're not going to worry about that. So now let's see if it graphs. Now I'm going to go back to graph. It's saying error again. So here I'm going to go to my error and see if it can give me any information. All right, notice here now in my y equals, I have some random characters in my equations. So I want to make sure in my y equals that all of those are empty. I don't have anything in here to mess up my scatter plot. So my calculator knows exactly what to graph. So if you have any random characters in here, any equations that you don't need, just get rid of those. All right, so that's another common error. Okay, I'm going to go back to graph again. So now there's another problem. I don't see my graph. So everything's fine, there's no error, but I don't see my points, which means my window is not set properly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to my window, And see how I have all these kind of strange values in here. So there are a couple ways I can do this. I'm going to go back to my table of values over here. And it looks like for my x values in the first column, my lowest value is a 2. So I'm going to go ahead and set my x minimum and my x maximum. So I'm going to set it at 0. My lowest value is a 2. 0 is a reasonable place to start. What is my x maximum? It looks like the highest value is a 10. I'm going to go ahead and go up to 12. Okay, just a couple above, a couple below. Leave my scale at 1. And now I'm going to look at my y values. My least, my y minimum is, let's see, I see a 35. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to, we'll go to 30. And my y maximum looks like it's at, what, 99? So I'll go ahead and go to 100. So that's a reasonable window to set for my graph. So now I'm going to go back to graph. And now I can see all those points. I'm also going to give you a quick way to be able to see your scatter plot. Rather than going to the window and setting your values according to your table, which, by the way, is something you should know how to do. You should know to look at your table of values and be able to set your minimums and maximums. But a little shortcut is this. If I go to my, sorry, not window, wrong button. If I go to zoom, right here, notice number 9 says zoom stat. So I'm going to hit 9 for zoom stat. And that, notice my window is a little bit different. So that zoom stat is going to give me a really good window for any statistics that I'm trying to graph. Now from here, I can go ahead and trace if I want to find some ordered pairs that are going to give me a good slope. I can just hit trace and I can skip from point to point and find a couple good points that'll give me a good slope for my line of fit when I want to create my line of fit.